Now, the clip I'm going to play for you first. There was a response made to it, and I'm going to put that in the description box. But a warning for this commentary, spoiler alert. All right, so you can stop this video now and go watch the 90. It's only 90 seconds long. Go watch the 90-second video in the description box and come on back. Go on ahead, go now, and then come on back. Okay. Now, this clip I'm going to play for you, and I'm not pro-doxing. I hate the practice, matter of fact. But, some things are just good to find out. Now, not in the video I'm going to play, but in the response video in the description box, you're going to see that person draw 3 red boxes around 3 of these people that you're going to see singing. Registered child predators.
As we celebrate Pride and the progress we've made over these past years, there's still work to be done. So to those of you out there who are still working against equal rights, we have a message for you.
You think we're sinful? You fight against our rights. You say we all lead lives you can't respect. But you're just frightened. You think that we'll corrupt your kids if our agenda goes unchecked. Funny, just this once, you're correct. We'll convert your children. Happens bit by bit, quietly and subtly, and you will barely notice it. We'll convert your children. We'll make them tolerant and fair. Just like you worried, they'll change their group of friends. You won't approve of where they go at night to protests. Oh, and you'll be disgusted so gross when they start finding things online that you've kept far from their sight, like information. We'll convert your children. Someone's gotta teach them not to hate. We're coming for them. We're coming for your children. We're coming for them. We're coming for your children. We're coming for them.
Singing songs about it too. That bold. And I'll get back to that later because of something he said in there. I'm going to talk about that for a while, but later. But in this clip I'm going to play for you this is a House Veterans Affairs Committee hearing. The dude asking the lady questions, his name is Jim Bank, a Republican congressman of Indiana. Right, the lady being questioned, her name is Cynthia Miller. And let me read for you her title so we can understand why they felt she's so important to drag her into a hearing. She is Director of America's University's Polarization and Extremist Research and Innovation Lab. And she made a lot of posts on social media that raised some red flags. Now, I could kill 3 birds with 1 stone because of the things that she says, but I'll stick to the focus of what I'm doing. She makes several statements that I can go into other things with, but I'm going to stick to my thing.
Dr. Cynthia Miller Idris, you have presented numerous concerning statements that may lead people to question your credibility. In an 8-tweet Twitter thread on August 13, you stated, quote, meat eating is used to evoke both pro-American and anti-government sentiments all at once. And, quote, red meat consumption is championed by the far right as a celebration of manliness. You've also stated that, quote, far-right podcasters have claimed that veggie burgers are part of a Jewish capitalist plot against white people in industrialized society. In another tweet, you stated that, quote, far-right soup kitchens put pork and lentil in their soup to exclude Muslims and Jews. Dr. Miller Idris, I had hamburger last night. Do you believe that I am an extremist? Does eating red meat make someone an extremist?
Of course not. Eating red meat does not make someone an extremist any more than being a service member or a veteran makes someone an extremist. We're talking about a complete fringe set of phenomenons here.
Do you think that you're able to provide impartial testimony to a committee that's mostly made up of red meat, of meat-eating members, like many on this committee?
Yes, thank you for the question. Although it's a distraction, I think, from the purpose of this hearing. I'm a red meat eater myself. So, I fully appreciate that question. I think it is absurd. It's a part of my book that points to the absurdity of the kinds of manipulative tactics that some of these extremist movements use. But the point of today's hearing is to talk about the vulnerability of veterans and not to talk about my tweets from last summer about parts of my book that analyze data.
You did tweet all of those wacky things. And let me say this, rhetoric like the kind that Dr. Miller Idris spouts is dangerous. When supposed academics portray normal, everyday behavior as problematic, it vilifies an entire community of peaceful people. And this leads to policies like we currently see in the FBI, who are now investigating parents as extremists for opposing critical race theory.
Eating meat makes you racist. Meat is a celebratory meal for racists. Now, I've mentioned a few times in other videos that there's a movement, a big one, to get rid of meat. And I'll get back to Cynthia in about 2 or 3 minutes.
Of the fanciest, highest rated, most theatrical and most delicious restaurants in Manhattan made a stunning announcement last month. 11 Madison Park announced that after a long closure due to the pandemic, it would reopen with an entirely animal-free, plant-based menu. It's part of a larger trend that seems to be slowly gathering more and more steam. People are seeing the light, as I have, that eating animal products can not only be bad for you, it can be bad for the planet. I'm not a vegetarian yet, but working my way to having more vegetables and less meat. My next guest says that this trend needs to speed up. What happened?
I had known that the way we treat animals on factory farms wasn't something that I morally could support, and I could just push it out of my mind. And that's what I did for many years. But I say that to say, I loved meat. As you said, I put it on the Instagram. I, chased after fancy restaurants. And then in my 20s, I began going more vegetarian and went back and forth. For a long time, I was vegan, except I would let myself have 3 burgers a month because I love burgers. And I say all that not because my personal journey on this is interesting, but because, and this is core to what I think should happen here, people like meat. I like meat. I'm not here to tell anybody it's not delicious. But what it is doing to the planet, what it is doing to the animals, and what it is doing to our own pandemic and antibiotic risk is something that should worry all of us.
I mean, people often ask, what can I do personally about climate change? And wouldn't you say if you do the math, probably the thing any single human being can do that would matter the most would be to eat less meat?
That is absolutely true. And I want to be really clear on this because people primarily do not go and they do not stay vegan. And so whatever my eating habits are, it's not what I'm recommending to everybody. It would be profound if everybody ate half as much meat, right? It is much more important than having twice as many people go vegan. It would be profound if everybody ate 30% less meat. The single biggest thing people can do to reduce climate risk is remove red meat, particularly from their diet. The problem is a lot of people do that, then they eat more chicken, and that's actually worse for the animals themselves because chickens are you kill more of them to eat them, right? A family will eat a cow over the course of a year, a chicken in a night, and they're treated worse than cows. So my hope is that we can find things that replace meat in the diet.
Us eating meat is killing the planet. The move to destroy the meat industry. And man, y'all should go see the stuff that they're engineering in these laboratories for us to eat instead of meat. It's ungodly what these scientists are doing. But racism. I brought all that up as a demonstration of how racism is used to get people to stop thinking, to blind people as to what people's true agendas are. Throw racism on it, throw racism out there, and people's brains stop working and their heart takes over.
This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org. I'm Amy Goodman. As gun violence soars in the United States, we spend the rest of the hour looking at the Second Amendment and its racist roots. Democracy Now!'s Nermeen Sheikh and I recently interviewed Carol Anderson, author of the new book, The Second. I began by asking her to go back in time and talk about where the Second Amendment came from.
This emerged out of the fear of Black people from slavery. that there was this massive fear about these slave revolts, Black people demanding their freedom, being willing to have an uprising to gain their freedom. And what that meant then was that you had this language of, we've got to keep this ferocious monster in chains. And you saw with each revolt, with each uprising, a series of statutes being put in place to say that African American, that the enslaved, that Black people could not own weapons, that they could not have access to weapons. And you also saw the rise and the structure of slave patrols and militias that were there and designed to contain that Black population. As the nation began to develop, as you had this war of independence, there was this fear of arming Black people. But as the nation developed after that war, one of the things that you had happening was with the Constitution, with the drafting of the Constitution, because the militias themselves had proven so untrustworthy, unreliable as a force to fight against the British invasion, that James Madison, in drafting the Constitution, had language in there that you would have federal control of the militias. That threat of what that meant sent James Madison into the first Congress determined to write a Bill of Rights that would quell that dissent, that would short circuit that movement for a new constitutional convention. And we've already seen what the power of the South has meant in terms of when the Constitution was being drafted itself, how the South said that we will not sign on to become part of this United States of America if we don't get the 3/5 clause, if we don't get 20 additional years on the Atlantic slave trade, if we don't get a fugitive slave clause. And so the South had already wielded its power in terms of being willing to scuttle the United States of America. And Madison believed strongly that this threat coming out of the anti-federalists in the South, out of Virginia, would do the same thing. And that becomes the basis for this Second Amendment.
Carol Anderson, similar to the Meat People agenda. Carol says that because the right to own a gun was made to protect white people from slaves and slave rebellions and stuff like that back then that makes the Second Amendment racist today. She's been going on tours putting this in people's head. And it's not just her. There are big people on board with this anti-gun thing. But the shield used to hide the agenda to outlaw gun ownership, yep, you guessed it, racism, blinds and deafens people, blocks foresight and common sense if all you need to do is just throw racism on it. Critical race theory is Maoism. It's communist. The proponents of critical race theory are Marxists. But because it has to do with racism, people just jump on board with it. I like watching dictators. I know much about dictators. I'm just not good at retaining, the names, dates, and location in my memory when it comes to them. But you keep seeing me use Mao, right? And not just these days, or when Trump got in office, or to even point out communism. I've been using Mao. I was using Mao because, he's my favorite one out of them all. Out of Hitler, Idi Amin, Pol Pot, Castro, and others, Mao is my favorite. And when I say favorite, I don't mean that I like what these people did. I just mean favorite as in achievement, like military prowess, like Hitler conquering damn near all of Europe. Hitler opened up some serious, huge cans of whoop ass over there. So when I say favorite, I don't mean like cannibals like Edie eating people and shit. But Mao was my favorite one because he demonstrated how people who are classified as the nothing nobodies of society can be turned into an army. He used peasants, people with nothing. He used them to take over the place. But it wasn't really him. It was him, yeah, but no.
In 1980, the trials of Lin Biao and the Gang of Four began. The trials were televised nationwide. By showing the way the Gang of Four was tried, Deng Xiaoping wanted the people to realize that a new age had arrived.
各位第二世纪友人同志，给你们扣上特务的帽子，逮捕关押，在监狱中间待了5年的手铐。
你不必作假了，咱家全不是你有份，你
站起
藏起来。为什么？
不许你讲话！
我有权辩护，有权揭发你。
不许你讲话！
现在由法庭工作人员投影1967年1月张林芝被批斗的现场照片和尸体检验照片。
这是张林芝被揪斗时的照片，尸体背部伤30处，头部有裂伤1处，身致骨膜。
这可以有你们说的大量事实，那是在鸡蛋里头捡骨头，捡来捡去。一个中国京剧院的录音放了多少次？一个什么东西？这个法庭这个6次，也说明问题嘛。你们说的我才知道的。通过丑化我，丑化毛泽东主席，丑化1万人民参加的无产阶级文化大革命啊！毛泽东主席的妻子38年整了。认识还不止，共患难了。战争的时候，唯一留在前方追随毛泽东主席的，只有我一个女同志。
Madame Mao remains herself to the end, ferocious, arrogant, and defiant.
战争的时候，唯一留在前方追随毛泽东主席的，只有我一个女同志。
最高人将其实行反其而令之刑。
It was his wife. It was Mao's wife, Jiang Qing. She was the head of that cultural revolution, and she was meaner than him. You saw her right there facing execution, but she's still right there talking crazy to them folks like, fuck y'all, suck my dick.
In 1966, I was in the middle school when the Cultural Revolution started.
The biggest nation on earth, China, is in turmoil. Is China's aging leader, Mao Zedong, losing control? Has Mao gone mad, driven perhaps to megalomania by the hysterical adulation of the teenage Red Guard?
I was totally pour my energy, even my life, into it to support whatever Mao asked me to do.
Mao had decided to mobilize the young people as the driving force of a vast campaign to purify the Communist Party. There was to be a new revolution, a cultural revolution, a revolution in people's thinking.
Teachers were the target of the political campaign. Mao taught us they have to receive the re-education by the worker and peasant. My female teacher, I love. She liked to wear beautiful clothes. She cared for appearance. There was a criminal accusation. One boy went to her bedroom and lead so many people. She went there to cut her hair. I went there too late. The hair has been cut already. He was humiliated. And I couldn't help. I couldn't rescue her. Shame on me. Shame on me. In America, I settled with my family, children, grandchildren, and also my career, my business. I'm 70 now. Now is the Rega generation, 70. I hope that they reflect, they regret, they re-examine. What should we prevent this kind of human tragedy happen again?
这里就是母亲的墓地。
Jiang Hongbing's mother lies meters from the spot where she was executed in the Cultural Revolution. The years of upheaval and destruction Mao unleashed claimed perhaps 1 million lives. Even so, Fang Zhongmo's case stands out. It was her zealous teenage son who denounced her as a counter-revolutionary.
在文革中间，有一首歌叫做《爹亲娘亲不如毛主席亲》。这首歌是这样的：天大地大，不如党的恩情大；爹亲娘亲不如毛主席亲。
One night, the teenager thought his mother spoke of Mao disrespectfully. In the furious row that broke out, she called for the return of purged leaders and attacked Mao for creating a personality cult.
我们就对他进行批判斗争，但是母亲不服气，她仍然把家庭里面挂着的毛泽东画像等等，把它撕下来烧毁。哎，在这中间，父亲和我先后到公检法军官组报案。母亲，没有辩护律师，在不到2个月的时间，就被定为反革命罪，执行枪决了。
You know the saying, behind every great man is a great woman? Well, it also applies to men who are the exact opposite of great. Jiang Qing was the 4th wife of Chairman Mao Zedong, the man who oversaw one of history's deadliest regimes. But rather than merely supporting her husband, Jiang was an active participant in his atrocities. But little did Mao Zedong realize that his demure little wife was using him as ruthlessly as he used others. Sex is engaging in the first rounds, Jiang Qing later said of their relationship, but what sustains interest in the long run is power. At the end of the 1950s, Mao's Great Leap Forward triggered probably the worst famine in human history, as villagers were corralled into communes and forced to meet impossible grain quotas. By late July, the first deaths from suicide from overzealous torture had been reported. But Mao responded simply by painting his own big character poster, declaring, "Bombard the headquarters." Shortly after, big character posters swept out of schools and across Beijing, covering every available surface. It became vital to study them every day to see if you'd been denounced. But the real terror started on August the 8th. That day, just 3 days after a gang of teenage girls had publicly beaten their vice principal to death, the Cultural Revolution group announced 16 new articles. The articles encouraged students to destroy the 4 olds: old customs, old culture, old habits, and old ideas. And most importantly, they declared that no action would be taken against students who engaged in violence, no matter what they did. And just like that, open season had been declared. Red August is infamous today for how quickly it devolved into anarchy. Teenagers, most of them barely 14 or 15, self-organized into Red Guard units that imprisoned teachers and fellow students and killed them in grotesque ways. People had boiling water poured over them, others were stoned to death. In elementary schools, children of only 10 or 12 forced their teachers to swallow nails. Soon the violence was spilling out into the streets as teenage Red Guards began attacking the homes of anyone who looked counter-revolutionary. Not long after, lists of targets prepared by the Cultural Revolution group started appearing on walls, adding to the violence. By late September, nearly 2,000 people had been murdered in Beijing alone. But for Jiang Qing, life was a non-stop party. As Mao used the chaos to shore up his own position, Jiang used it to settle scores. In January of 1967, her group overthrew the local Communist Party in Shanghai, triggering a wave of uprisings as Red Guards seized weapons from the army and turned cities into war zones. At last, united with the last member of her Gang of Four, the labor activist Wang Hongwen, Jiang became the face of the chaos gripping China. She appeared on posters, made speeches to tens of thousands, had books dedicated to her. In charge of cultural output, she banned all but 8 operas and wrote exacting rules on how everything from music to theatre to novels should be created.
Mao's biggest weapon were children, who his wife and he brainwashed into turning against their parents. You saw me play a few people who are elderly these days, but expressing regret for getting their parents locked up or even executed. And those were only a mere few minutes of examples. It's a lot more than that. A survivor of Mao's regime, here in the United States now at the school board meeting. About what?
More developments tonight on how parents and common-sense Americans are pushing back against the destructive far-left critical race theory ideology that's infiltrating America's schools. Take a look at this.
I've been very alarmed about what's going on in our school. You are now training our children to be social justice warriors and to loathe our country and our history. Growing up in Mao's China, all this seemed very familiar. The communist regime used the same critical theory to divide people. The only difference is they use class instead of race. This is indeed the American version of the Chinese Cultural Revolution. The critical race theory has its roots in cultural Marxism. It should have no place in our schools.
Joining us now for reaction, Fox News contributor Jason Chaffetz, along with the mother you just saw in that video, Xi Van Fleet, is with us. You were 6 years old when the Cultural Revolution began in China, and you have spoken eloquently about what it was like in school, and posters hung in hallways, and teachers and students would attack each other for being ideologically impure. Can you explain what you experienced and the similarities you see?
Okay. I just want to let the American people know that what's going on in our school and in our country is really a replay of the Cultural Revolution in China. And I want people to see there's similarities, and the similarities are terrifying. They use the same ideology and same methodology, even the same vocabulary, and with the same goal. The ideology is cultural Marxism, and we were divided into groups as oppressor and oppressed. And here we use race, and there they use class. And the people here who have a different review were labeled racist. But in the Cultural Revolution, the label is counter-revolutionary. So it is a hat that fits all. And once the hat is on your head, your life is ruined.
Yeah. And you speak from real experience. I mean, you were 6 years old, but you lived 20 years under this oppression. And it sounds like out of the lessons you learned under Mao and the revolution, you see this groupthink now appearing in America, and you're trying to warn Americans that you don't want to go down this road.
And the vocabulary is even the same, wokeness. And to be specific, we used class wokeness. In Chinese, it is 阶级觉悟. Your level of wokeness determine your chance to get promotion or to get benefit.
What would your message be to America if they continue to go down this road?
I just want people to know that the freedom is fragile, and we can lose it any time if we don't defend it. And there's a lot of Chinese Americans who have the same experience and share my point of view. And I know that more and more people will step up and share their stories and tell the American people critical race theory is not anti-racism. It itself is racist. It's divisive, it's destructive, and it is dangerous.
Lady says she sees all the signs and signals that Mao gave off in this critical race theory. There's even an attempt to movement to federalize the schools. School boards calling the feds in to start arresting parents, just like they were doing in China under Mao and his wife. But before people just reject the stuff I've said against critical race theory, maybe you should go look into things instead of just thinking, racism! Critical race theory is going to fight racism. Go look into what they're really up to.
But you're just frightened. You think that we'll corrupt your kids if our agenda goes unchecked. Funny, just this once, you're correct. We'll convert your children. Happens bit by bit, quietly and subtly, and you will barely notice it. Happens bit by bit, quietly and subtly, and you will barely notice it.
The gay dude singing that song said that they plan on turning children against parents. And he said that people won't even notice it happening. And of course, all this is going to be done under the guise of fairness and equity. He said it somewhere in that song. Critical race theory. I told y'all in the other video that the gay agenda is intertwined with this race theory, and so is Mao. You see the censorship in all things Mao starting, including the tearing down of statues and historical figures. But all people can think is, but they was racist. What, was Uncle Ben racist? Was Ancient Mama racist? Did they attempt to, and they actually attempted this, but did they attempt to remove Mr. Potato Head's mustache or any other male identifiers from him because he was racist? Did they cancel Pepe Le Pew because he was racist? Go learn what a cultural revolution looks like, maybe under a Pol Pot and others. And from there, you should be able to see what's going on now and how it starts. Now, I'm about to get out of here. Now, her name is Khadijah. A few weeks ago, she did a video about how the judge in the Rittenhouse case told the defense that told the prosecutor that they can't refer to the people that Kyle shot as victims. And I put a comment on her board, and she responded in the comment, and after that, she did a video proving to me that racism exists. But I don't need that to be proven to me because I already know it. By individuals and systemically, there's racism. I already know that. So she does a video and reads this article about something she says is racism. I'm not going to play that part. I'll put her videos in the description box and you can go hear them if you want to. But let me play the 2 points where she mentions me.
Let me read this article. Because the Ohio School Board president is going to resign because she refused to vote against an anti-racism resolution. Y'all see all this forceful stuff that's coming down the pipe? That it's an agenda? I hope you listen at this, the Mad Hat Doctor. Lauren Kohler, who was serving her 5th year with the State Board of Education in Ohio, told NBC News that she intended to offer her resignation. This is bullshit. That is finance funneled. And a lot of y'all are being just sheep being led to slaughter. I don't know. What y'all think? Maybe I'm wrong. What you think, Mad Hat Doctor? What you think about this one?
Now, the comment that I put on her cow video was because I saw her doing what a lot of people do, which was to ignore why those people got shot. And they'll start talking about other things, like he crossed state lines with guns and other stuff. And I told her that He could be guilty of three, 4 crimes, but that would make him guilty of charges 5 and 6. In other words, you can't prove murder just because he crossed state lines and did this and that. Those people, I told her, those people rushed an armed man and assaulted him. But Khadijah's response was to try to get me to, her response was to try to stop me from thinking via a story about racism. I was supposed to throw my brain out the window and put my heart up in my head in this place.